daughter-in-law snapped in the middle of our family dinner. I couldn't help laughing. What she didn't realize was that my net worth was quietly sitting at $5 million. So I simply smiled and said, "Sweetheart, it might be time for you to start looking for a new place to live. Hi, I'm Eileen. For the past 3 years, I've lived behind a carefully built illusion, one that let me see people's true colors when they thought I had nothing left." The dinner invitation came on a Tuesday morning. My son Darren's voice carried a hint of tension, as it often did when his wife Thalia hovered nearby. "Mom, would you like to come for dinner Friday?" Thalia's making her famous lasagna. I almost laughed. The woman could barely boil water, but I kept my thoughts to myself. Friday evening arrived with an October chill that cut straight through my coat. I walked the familiar 6 blocks to their house, the very home I'd secretly bought for them as a wedding gift 7 years earlier. Darren greeted me with a quick, polite hug. Thalia appeared moments later, perfectly styled in a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked me up and down with cool detachment. The table was set with their best china, except for my place. My plate and glass didn't match, a quiet reminder of where I stood in her eyes. As we ate, small talk turned into subtle jabs. Thalia described her plans for modern furniture, dismissing the pieces I'd once helped them choose. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Eileen, we've been worried about you living alone in that tiny apartment. It's been 3 years since Harold passed, and you're still struggling. You shop at thrift stores. Are you sure you're managing?" I set down my fork and smiled. They had no idea who they were really talking to. "You don't even own a car anymore." From their point of view, that was true. What they didn't know was that every detail of my life was intentional. The modest apartment, bought in cash. The thrift store clothes, a disguise. No car, I simply preferred to walk. "I get by," I said. "Getting by isn't living, Mom," Darren replied. And for a moment I heard the son I used to know, before Thalia's influence hardened him. Then Thalia stepped in. "Eileen, we can't keep helping you forever. Darren works hard. We want to start a family, and we have our own future to plan." I waited for my son to correct her, to admit their help was nothing more than the occasional dinner invite. He stayed silent. "You're only 64, she pressed. "Plenty of people your age work." Walmart is always hiring greeters. A greeter. After 2 decades running a successful business and quietly building a fortune large enough to buy their entire neighborhood, she pictured me smiling at strangers for minimum wage. "A job," I repeated. "Yes," she said brightly. "Something to give you purpose. Independence. Self-respect." The irony nearly made me laugh. "I've been thinking," she continued, "you've become too comfortable depending on others. On Darren. It's not healthy." "Is that what you think I am? Dependent?" I asked. "Well, let's be honest," she said, glancing at Darren for support. "Every time something breaks, who do you call?" The answer, of course, was no one. I hadn't asked them for a cent since Harold's funeral. "Don't take it personally," she added, warming to her lecture. "We're young, ambitious, and we can't keep supporting someone who won't even try to support herself. Won't even try." I looked at the woman who spent her husband's paycheck on designer handbags while living in the house I secretly owned. "Thalia," I said quietly. "Yes?" "You have no idea what's coming for you." Silence. Darren shifted. Thalia blinked, unsettled. "Thank you for dinner," I said, rising. The lasagna was exactly what I expected. I walked toward the door. Behind me, a sharp whisper. Did she just threaten me? Hand on the knob, I turned back. "Oh, and about that job advice," I added with a cool smile. "You might want to start updating your own resume." 3 days later, Darren called. I'd been waiting. "Mom," his voice cautious, "can we talk?" "Of course, sweetheart. Would you like to come over?" A long pause. In 3 years, he'd never set foot in my apartment. Now he was coming. I brewed his favorite coffee, the expensive kind I kept hidden. I tucked away the financial statements spread across my desk. I traded my usual cardigan for something a little nicer, still simple. When Darren arrived, his eyes swept the one-bedroom space with barely hidden pity. A tiny kitchen, secondhand furniture, everything designed to look ordinary, exactly as I intended. The rest of the furniture, the mismatched dishes, every piece had been chosen to create exactly the impression I wanted. "Mom, this place is..." Darren searched for words. "Small?" I offered. I was going to say depressing. I poured his coffee into one of my hidden good cups. He took a sip and raised his eyebrows. "This is really good. I treat myself now and then." I said with a faint smile. We sat across from each other in the quiet kitchen. Finally, he cleared his throat. About Friday night, Talia's upset. She thinks you threatened her. I met his eyes. What do you think? He shifted uneasily. I think something's going on that I don't understand. You've seemed different. And the way you spoke to her, telling her she has no idea what's coming, sounded like a threat. I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. Do you remember what your father used to say about people who confuse kindness with weakness? Darren nodded. He said they learn the difference eventually. Exactly. I set down my cup. For 3 years I've been kind. Patient. I've listened to your wife treat me like a burden. Tell me how to live, what to wear, even what to eat. When was the last time she asked how I'm really doing? Not about money, but about me. He opened his mouth and closed it again. When was the last time she asked about my friends, my hobbies, my life? He stared into his coffee. She doesn't mean to be cold, he muttered. Doesn't she? The silence stretched. So what are you saying, Mom? Are you cutting us off? I'm saying some people are about to discover that actions have consequences. That still sounds like a threat. I stood, walked to the bookshelf, and slid out a manila folder hidden behind paperbacks. Returning to the table, I placed it in front of him. There's something you need to know about your mother. Inside were bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, proof of everything I'd kept hidden for 3 years. Darren's eyes widened as he turned page after page. Mom, what is this? This, I said quietly, is who I really am. Account balances with more zeros than he'd imagined. Deeds to houses and commercial buildings across 3 states. I don't understand, he whispered. Your father and I were far more successful than anyone knew. When he passed, I inherited everything. I'm worth about $5 million. He looked at me as if I'd spoken another language. But you live here. You shop at thrift stores. You don't even have a car. By choice, I said. Why? Because I needed to know who would love me when they thought I had nothing. The realization hit him hard. You were testing us. I was protecting myself from people like your wife. His hands trembled. You let us believe you were struggling. You let Thalia. I let Thalia reveal exactly who she is, I said evenly. And she did. Repeatedly. But I'm your son. Yes. And I needed to know if you were still my son, or if you'd become something else entirely. He flinched. When was the last time you called just to talk? Invited me somewhere without Thalia insisting? Stood up for me when she was unkind? Each question landed like a stone. He had no answers. I never realized. I didn't think she was that bad, he murmured. Or you chose not to see it because it was easier. Silence settled over the room. Finally, Darren spoke, his voice barely audible. What happens now? I studied the face of the boy who used to bring me wildflowers and call me the prettiest mom in the world, the man who'd let his wife humiliate me without a word. Now, I said softly. We find out if it's too late for you to remember who you really are, and whether Thalia can change before the truth reaches her. I smiled, and it wasn't the warm kind. Thalia is about to learn that some people aren't as helpless as they look. Mom, what are you planning? Darren asked. Justice, I said simply. Long overdue justice. Darren shot to his feet, pacing to the window. This is crazy. You can't just, punish her for a rough marriage? 3 years of calculated cruelty, I corrected. 3 years of treating me like I was nothing, while living off an income that exists because of the connections your father and I built. He froze. What? Did you think that marketing job just appeared? Your father called in favors for that interview. We've been protecting your future, your entire adult life. His face went pale. So, how much of my life is a lie? None of it was a lie, I said gently. But some of it was guarded. I stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm. I love you, Darren. Always have. But love doesn't mean I'll accept mistreatment, even from family. He turned toward me, the boy I once knew flickering behind his eyes. What do I do? That's for you to decide. Ask yourself, has Thalia ever encouraged you to spend time with me? Has she ever valued me for anything other than what I could provide? He started to answer, then fell silent. I thought so. I squeezed his arm. A storm is coming. When it hits, you'll have to choose where you stand. Is that a threat? It's a promise, I replied. And unlike some people, I keep my promises. I gave them a week. A week for Darren to see his wife with new eyes. A week for Thalia to wonder what I meant. The call came Wednesday morning. Thalia's voice was sharp. "Eileen, we need to talk now." "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "Don't play games." "Darren told me about your money." I settled into my favorite chair with my coffee. "Did he?" "Yes. And I want to know what kind of sick game you're playing." "What game do you think I'm playing? You let us think you were struggling." "You let me worry about you. Try to help you." I almost laughed. "And how exactly did you help me, dear?" Silence. Then defensive. "We invited you to dinner. Included you in family events." "You mean those dinners where you served me on mismatched plates and suggested I apply as a store greeter?" More silence. "Tonight, 7 o'clock, she snapped. "You owe us an explanation." The line went dead. I finished my coffee, then opened the back of my closet. Gone were the thrift store cardigans. From behind them, I pulled the wardrobe of my real life. A black dress of quiet elegance, genuine jewelry, shoes worth more than her monthly shopping sprees. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who could buy everything Thalia owned without checking a balance. It was time to stop hiding. At exactly 7, I walked up to the house. Yes, my house. The mortgage they thought Darren's salary covered? I'd been paying it all along. Darren opened the door, his eyes widening. "Mom, you look like yourself, like when Dad was alive." Behind him, Thalia appeared, dressed for battle in a designer outfit. Next to the calm assurance of real wealth, she looked like a child in costume. Well, she said coldly. "The poor widow has quite the wardrobe." "Among other things," I replied. We moved to the living room, the one I'd helped furnish, in the home I owned. I sat on the sofa they thought was theirs. "Let's hear it," Thalia demanded, arms crossed. "The whole truth." "How much money do you have? Why keep this secret? What kind of person pretends to be broke for 3 years?" I folded my hands in my lap, perfectly calm. "Ask all you like," I said softly. "I'm ready to tell you everything." "The kind of person who wants to know who her real friends are," I replied. Thalia gave a short, sharp laugh. "I'm your daughter-in-law, not your friend." "Family doesn't lie to family, doesn't it?" I tilted my head. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why you told the neighbors I was becoming forgetful. Why you hinted to the mailman that I might need a care facility." Her face drained of color. "I never said that. You told Mrs. Henderson I was showing signs of dementia," I continued evenly. "You've been planning that story for months." Darren turned toward her, stunned. "Thalia, is that true? I was concerned," she snapped. "She was acting strange, dressing like a bag lady." I thought she might be declining. "Or he," I said quietly. "You were preparing to have me declared incompetent so you could access what you thought was Harold's insurance money." The accusation hung in the air. "That's ridiculous, Roy Pie," she finally whispered. "Why would I do that?" I reached into my bag and set a manila envelope on the table. "Because 3 months ago, you contacted an elder law attorney to ask how quickly guardianship could be arranged if a relative had significant assets." Darren shot to his feet. "What?" I opened the envelope, printed emails, phone logs, consultation notes. "You wanted to know if guardianship would let you control bank accounts and investments. You even asked about liquidating assets for the patient's own good." Thalia's voice was barely audible. "How did you get those? Money opens many doors, dear, including ones you thought were locked." Darren stared at his wife. "Please tell me this isn't true." "It's not what it looks like," she said desperately. I was worried about her. "Interesting," I said, "because the attorney's notes mention your curiosity about accessing funds, not about medical care." The last trace of color left her face. "Why?" Darren asked, hollow-voiced. I looked at Thalia, who now studied the floor. "Because she never loved you, Darren. She loved what she thought you could provide. When she realized your salary wouldn't cover her lifestyle, she started looking for other sources of income." "That's a lie," Thalia whispered. "Then explain the credit card debt you've hidden," I said, placing another document on the table. "The cash advance shopping sprees, the jewelry you pawned and replaced with fakes." Darren turned white. "What?" "She's been living beyond your means for 2 years," I added softly. $43,000 you never knew about." Thalia's eyes filled, not with remorse, but with fury. You set me up." "I didn't set you up," I replied. "I simply stopped shielding you from the results of your own choices." She rose unsteadily. "You think you've won? Won what?" I haven't destroyed your marriage, Thalia. You did, when you decided my son was just a stepping stone. I love Darren. You love the status he represents. Security a meal ticket, but not him. How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? I stepped closer until she had to meet my eyes. Do you want to know what happens next? Her voice was barely a whisper. What? You're going to pack your things and leave this house tonight. She laughed high and brittle. You can't make me leave my own home. Actually, I can. I drew out one final document, the deed, my name clear on the front. This house is mine. It always has been. For 7 years, you've lived here as my guest. The room went silent. Darren stared at the paper as if it were written in another language. Mom, what does this mean? It means, I said calmly, your wife has 30 minutes to pack a bag and go. Thalia's voice cracked with fury. You can't do this. I have rights. Tenant rights. I met her gaze without blinking. And as the owner, I know every one of them. Start packing. You're not a tenant, I said evenly. You're a guest who stayed too long. I folded the deed and slipped it back into my purse. 30 minutes, Thalia. After that, I called the police for trespassing. Darren, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Say something. This is our home. But Darren just stared at the spot where the deed had been, the truth finally settling over him. Darren, she shouted. He looked up at her, eyes suddenly clear. Get out, he said quietly. What? Get out of my mother's house. Her face crumpled, but I felt no triumph. Only the tired relief of a long charade finally ended. This isn't over, she hissed, hatred sharp in her eyes. You think you've won, but it isn't over. I gave her a cool smile. Oh, but it is. This is only the beginning of what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness. She fled upstairs, slamming drawers, throwing clothes, sobbing with rage. Darren and I stood in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of 3 years of lies. Mom, he said at last. Yes? I'm sorry. I know you are, sweetheart. What happens now? I turned to the window, the quiet street bathed in early evening light. Now, I said softly, we find out if it's possible to rebuild what we lost. The next morning, the calls began. First came Margaret, my sister-in-law, Harold's brother's wife, her voice tight with judgment. Eileen, what on earth has gotten into you? Thalia called me in tears. She says you threw her out of her own home. I sat in my small apartment, still maintaining the illusion, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. Did she mention why? I asked. She said you've been hiding money, pretending to be poor when you're actually wealthy. Eileen, that's disturbing. And now you've kicked a young woman out over some family quarrel. Harold would be ashamed. The words stung, though they shouldn't have. Margaret had once been like a sister to me, before Thalia poisoned that well too. Margaret, of course, I said calmly. Did Thalia mention the attorney she consulted about having me declared incompetent? Or the $43,000 of secret debt she's carrying? Silence. Ask her about those when you're done feeling sorry for her, I added, and ended the call. The phone rang again immediately. Harold's sister, Patricia. Same outrage, same accusations, same blind defense of Thalia. By noon, I'd fielded half a dozen calls, each one parroting Thalia's version. Poor, innocent daughter-in-law, victim of a vindictive mother-in-law who had lost her mind. I listened politely, offered almost nothing in return, and made mental notes of every name. Let them reveal themselves. The most unsettling call came from my nephew David, whom I'd helped through college only 5 years ago. And Eileen, he began in a carefully professional tone. The family's worried you might be showing signs of memory problems. Thalia mentioned odd behavior, paranoia, accusations. I set my cup down with care. David, do you remember who paid for your final year at Northwestern? Mom and Dad helped, and I had loans, he said hesitantly. Your parents gave $8,000. I paid the remaining $32,000. I also paid for your sister's wedding, your mother's cancer treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, and the down payment on your first home. Tell me, does that sound like someone losing her memory? Silence. Then a quiet click as he hung up. The pattern was clear. Thalia hadn't vanished quietly. She'd launched a campaign, painting herself as the victim of an unstable older woman, letting her story seep through the family like poison in a well. 2 days later, Darren called, his voice strained and weary. Mom, can we meet? We need to talk. Of course, I said when Darren asked to meet. Where? Not at the house, he replied. Thalia's been calling everyone. The family's in an uproar. We met at a small downtown cafe, the kind of place where hard conversations could pass unnoticed. Darren looked like he hadn't slept in days. Red-rimmed eyes, rumpled clothes, hair in disarray. She's destroying me, he said without preamble. What do you mean? She isn't just telling her side of the story. She's making things up. He rubbed a hand over his face. She told my boss you have dementia, that I'm distracted and might not be able to do my job. The cruelty of it stole my breath. What did your boss say? He was sympathetic. Suggested I consider family medical leave. Darren's voice rose. But what was I supposed to tell him? That my wife tried to have my mother declared incompetent to steal her money? That I've been living in a house I didn't know she owns? That my entire adult life sits on foundations I barely understand? Lower your voice, sweetheart, I said, touching his hand. He gave a bitter laugh. She's always one step ahead. She's poisoned half the family against you and made me look like a fool at work. What else? She's living with her sister now, crying to anyone who'll listen. Says you manipulated our marriage. Says you're dangerous. I sipped my coffee. Thalia was turning her humiliation into a weapon. There's more, Darren continued. She's been to a lawyer. For what? The house. She's claiming tenant rights, that you forced her out. And the lawyer told her she has no case. But that's not the point. She's just trying to make life miserable. I nodded. Exactly what I'd expected from someone like Thalia. Show me, I said. What? Show me what she's telling people. Darren handed me his phone. Post after post appeared, crafted to draw sympathy, each one vague but cutting. Going through a difficult time with family. Sometimes the ones you trust hurt you the most. Prayers appreciated. Learning hard truths about manipulation and psychological abuse. When someone spends years pretending to be something they're not, what else are they hiding? Trust your instincts. Each had dozens of comments. Support, outrage, condemnation of unnamed villains. She's good, I admitted. She's evil, Darren muttered. No, she's desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that show who they really are. He frowned, scrolling again. I don't see it. She never once says she loves you, I pointed out. Not once. She talks about betrayal, manipulation, lies, but never about missing her husband. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Because she doesn't. Because she never did. This isn't grief, I said softly. It's anger at being exposed. We sat in silence, the weight of it settling between us. What do we do now, he asked. I let a slow smile spread across my face. You let her keep digging. He blinked. What? Right now, she thinks she's winning. She feels triumphant. Confident people overreach. They slip. You think she'll make a mistake? I know she will, I said. I've watched her for 3 years. I know exactly what kind of person she is. I reached into my purse and placed a thick manila envelope on the table. Darren's eyes widened. What's that? Insurance, I said. The kind that proves everything I've told you about your wife. Every last word. What do you mean, Mom? Darren asked. I mean that while Thalia was busy plotting my downfall, I was quietly documenting hers. Every hidden debt, every lie, every manipulation. I tapped the thick envelope. It's all here. Why haven't you used it? I wanted to give her enough rope to trip herself. Judging by the last few days, she's nearly there. He swallowed hard. What are you planning? Justice, I said simply. Pure, undeniable justice. And what does that look like? It looks like the truth. Every ugly, calculating piece of it. And it's coming soon. People like Thalia can't resist one final strike. When she makes it, we'll be ready. I didn't have to wait long. 1 week later, at 2:30 in the afternoon, the phone rang as I reviewed investment portfolios. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Holloway? This is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Sacramento Police Department. I need to ask you a few questions about a report that's been filed against you. My heart stilled. A report? Yes, ma'am. A woman named Thalia Holloway alleges that you're the victim of financial abuse by family members, and that those same relatives are now retaliating against her for trying to help. The audacity took my breath. Of course, Detective. I'll come in immediately. As soon as I hung up, I called my attorney, Jonathan Reeves, the man who had managed my affairs since Harold's passing. Jonathan, meet me at the Sacramento PD right away. Thalia just accused my son and me of elder abuse and financial exploitation. That's serious, he said after a pause. Yes, I replied, and completely fabricated. 30 minutes later, dressed in a tailored suit and carrying a folder of carefully organized documents, I walked into the station beside Jonathan. Detective Martinez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a brisk manner, looked surprised. Mrs. Holloway, she said, you're not at all what I expected. What exactly did her report claim? I asked. She consulted her notes. According to Ms. Thalia Holloway, you're a vulnerable, elderly woman who has been financially abused by your son and controlled to keep you dependent. She alleges your son has become threatening since she tried to help. Jonathan and I exchanged a glance. She also supplied photos of your apartment, the detective continued, laying out images of my small, neatly kept rooms, pictures clearly taken through the windows. And she provided bank statements showing a checking account with a very low balance. I recognized the decoy account instantly. Detective, I asked calmly, when were these photos taken? She says within the last month. And she obtained them how? She claims she was conducting welfare checks. I raised an eyebrow. So stalking. Detective Martinez shifted uneasily. Jonathan leaned forward. Have you verified any of her allegations? We're in the process, she said. Good, I replied, sliding my own thick folder across the table. Because I have evidence you'll want to see. Proof of exactly who Thalia Holloway really is. I placed my real bank statements on the table. Detective Martinez's eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. Mrs. Holloway, these show assets of roughly $5 million. Yes, I said evenly. The papers Thalia gave you only show one small household account. I keep several, for different purposes. Jonathan, my attorney, slid more documents forward. Detective, my client is a wealthy widow who chose to live modestly. She's never been financially abused, and her son has never controlled her. Then why would Ms. Thalia make these accusations? Martinez asked. I gave a thin, grim smile. Because she tried to exploit me. When she failed, she went for one last desperate play. I opened the thick envelope I'd once shown Darren. These prove she contacted an elder law attorney about gaining guardianship over me, to access what she believed were substantial assets. The detective's face hardened as she read the evidence. Attorney notes, secret debts, and weeks of online searches about conservatorship and mental health claims. If this is accurate, Martinez said at last, she's filed a false police report. Yes, Jonathan replied, and we'll be seeking a restraining order as well. Martinez nodded. I'll confer with the district attorney. Based on this, she's committed multiple crimes. Our next step is an arrest. 2 hours later, I sat in my true home, a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, and the antiques Harold and I had collected over decades. My phone rang. Mom, Darren said, breathless. The police just called. They arrested Thalia. I know. You know? How? Where are you? I went by your apartment. It's empty. I looked around at the quiet luxury. I'm at home, sweetheart. My real home. Silence. Come to Meridian Towers on 5th. Penthouse level. I'll explain. 30 minutes later, Darren stepped into the living room and froze. This is where you've been living? This is where I've always lived, I said gently. Even when I visited you in that little apartment, I came back here. He sank into a leather chair, stunned. She really tried to have you declared incompetent? Yes, and she filed a false police report. Why? Why go that far? I poured a glass of wine that cost more than her monthly shopping spree. Because when she couldn't get what she wanted, she tried to destroy us out of spite. What happens to her now? She'll face charges, false reporting, attempted fraud, possibly stalking. She'll likely have a record, maybe time in jail. Darren was quiet for a long moment. I feel like I don't know anything about my own life. You know the important things, I said softly. You know I love you. You know you're a good man who got caught up with someone unworthy, and you know you have a second chance to build something real. Do I? Do we? That depends, I said, meeting his eyes. Can you forgive yourself for not seeing her true nature? And forgive me for the test I put you through? You were protecting yourself. I was. But I was also testing you, and that wasn't fair. A mother shouldn't have to test her child's love. For the first time in years, I saw the boy he used to be, before Thalia's influence dulled his light. Can we start over? He asked. I smiled. I'd like that very much. No more tests, no more games, no more lies. He nodded. No more tests. But sweetheart, I added, a hint of humor breaking the heaviness. If you ever bring home another woman like Thalia, I'm moving to Europe and leaving no forwarding address. For the first time in months, my son laughed. A real, unguarded laugh that filled the room and at last felt like home. 6 months later, I sat on my terrace, the sunset washing the city in gold, when Darren called with the news I'd been expecting. "Divorce is final," he said, his voice lighter than I'd heard in years. "How do you feel?" "Free, terrified, but free." I smiled. Freedom after captivity always carried a mix of relief and uncertainty. "And Thalia?" I asked. "She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and has to repay all legal costs for the false report. There's also a 2-year restraining order." "Good," I said quietly. There was a pause, then the question I'd been waiting for. "Mom, when did you know? When did you realize she might try something like this?" I sipped my wine, remembering. "Second week after your father's funeral, she visited, supposedly to check on me. She spent 5 minutes asking about my grief, and 45 asking about Harold's insurance, investments, and what kind of inheritance I'd leave you. That wasn't grief, sweetheart. That was calculation." I heard him processing, revisiting that day with new clarity. "That's when I decided to test her," I continued, "to see if my instincts were right. And they were," he said softly. "Unfortunately, yes. But Darren, understand this. I didn't do all of it just to prove Thalia was dangerous. I did it to save you. From a life where someone would slowly dismantle who you are." Silence settled between us, comfortable this time. "I have something to tell you too," he said at last. "I've been seeing someone." My heart tightened. Half hope, half protective worry. "Tell me about her." "Her name's Rebecca. She's a teacher near my office. We met at a coffee shop 3 months ago. She doesn't know anything about our money. She thinks I'm just a regular guy with a regular job. He lives in the house I inherited from my grandmother." I laughed softly. "You told her you inherited my house?" "Well, technically that's true. Someday. What's she like?" "She's kind. Volunteers at an animal shelter, drives a 10-year-old Honda, and thinks Olive Garden is fancy dining." "Do you love her?" A long pause. "I think I could, but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of not knowing the difference between real love and manipulation. Of making the same mistake again." I walked to the terrace edge, the city lights beginning to flicker below. "Sweetheart, your father used to say the difference is simple. Love makes you feel like the best version of yourself. Manipulation makes you feel like you're never enough." "I like that," he said softly. "How does Rebecca make you feel? Like I used to feel before? Like I'm enough?" "Then trust that feeling. And trust yourself. You're not the same man who once fell for Thalia's games. You're wiser now." "I hope so." "I know so. And when you're ready, I'd like to meet her." "Really?" "Really. This time I'll be myself from the start. No tests, no disguises." "She might be intimidated by all this," he said, picturing the penthouse. "Then we'll meet somewhere neutral. Somewhere she's comfortable." He exhaled, the sound of relief carrying through the line. "If she doesn't like you," he asked, "then she's not the right woman for you. And if I don't like her, I'll keep that to myself unless you ask." "Mom." "Yes?" "Thank you for saving me when I didn't even know I needed saving." After we hung up, I stayed on the terrace as night fell, city lights sparkling like stars below. For the first time in years, the future felt open, bright, and ours. I thought about the past 3 years, about the elaborate deception I'd maintained, the pain of watching my son slowly disappear under his wife's influence. I thought about Harold, who would have handled things differently. He never had to wonder whether people loved him for himself or for his money. That burden fell to me after his death. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret, Harold's sister-in-law, the first to condemn me when Thalia began her campaign of lies. "Eileen, I owe you an apology. Patricia and I compared notes. I'm ashamed I believed Thalia without asking for your side. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "Apology accepted. I think we both learned something about judging without the facts." Her response came quickly. "We did. And Eileen, I'm proud of you." Protecting yourself and Darren took incredible strength. More messages followed. Patricia, David, cousins I'd barely spoken to in years. One by one, they apologized, admitting they'd been too quick to believe Thalia's story. I answered each with grace, but quietly noted who had turned so fast. Some ties could be mended, None would be quite the same. The last message of the evening was from Detective Martinez. Mrs. Holloway, Thalia attempted to call you from jail today. The system blocked it under the restraining order, but I wanted you to know. I wasn't surprised. Thalia would never truly accept defeat. Even from jail, she was likely planning her next move. But for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worried. I'd stopped hiding. I'd reclaimed my voice, my power, and my life. I poured another glass of wine and looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow I'd begin selling the house where Darren and Thalia once lived, giving the proceeds to my son as a real inheritance. Tomorrow I'd start planning for the future, travel, philanthropy, or simply living openly without fear. My phone rang again. Darren. Mom, I forgot to ask. What are you going to do now? I gazed over the skyline, endless possibilities stretching before me. I'm going to live, I said, honest and unafraid. Exactly as I am. And who is that? He asked. I smiled. A woman who survived a test of her own making and came out stronger. A mother who fought for her son. A widow who honored her husband's memory by protecting what we built together. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. After we hung up, I stayed on the terrace until the last city lights blurred into the night. For 3 years, I'd lived in the shadows, testing those I loved, guarding against anyone who might use me. Now I was ready to step fully into the light, well-dressed, confident, unashamed of my success or my choices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new relationships, but whatever came next, I'd face it as myself. And that, after years of careful disguise, felt like the greatest victory of all. What about you? If you were in my place, would you have done the same? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And before you go, check out the 2 stories waiting on your screen now. Both are channel favorites and will absolutely surprise you.